Hi folks, HR Funk here, with a classic pistol review to kick off the new year. And this is a classic pistol review I've really been looking forward to recording because this is a special pistol to me. This is my Smith & Wesson Model 469 9mm semi-automatic pistol. And one of the things that makes this pistol special is the fact that it was purchased for me as a Christmas gift by my lovely wife. How cool is that? And something else that makes this pistol special is the fact that, and some of you who are conversant in nomenclature for Smith & Wesson pistols might have already picked up on this. This pistol, as I said, is a 469. Normally the 469 denotes a blued steel slide over a alloy frame with a blackened anodized finish. As you can see, that's not the case with this one. And when I first came across this firearm on an online retail site, I thought that it had been mismarked. I thought it was a stainless Model 669, and it turns out this is one of a very limited number of pistols that Smith & Wesson produced in 1984 for the Ashland Shooting Supply here in Ashland, Ohio. And it is actually a brushed nickel finish on both the slide and the frame. There were not very many of these made. I've seen numbers as low as 25 units. I tend to think there were more than that were made, but there were not very many of them with this finish, and I managed to find one. Interestingly, it was advertised online as being a stainless steel pistol, and when I researched it and found that this is specifically what it was, I started to bid on the pistol, and then my wife jumped in, hit the buy it now button, and actually purchased this for me, as I said, as a Christmas gift. So extremely cool, an extremely interesting pistol, and this is a pistol with a little bit of a history that I'm going to go into right now. Now, some of you below the age of about 35 or so might not realize it, but there was a time in this country when compact handguns chambered for full-size service pistol cartridges were thought of along the lines of a commander-size 1911. Anything smaller really required the shooter to go down to a smaller and less powerful cartridge in order to get a more compact handgun. So the idea of a full power, or at least a service pistol power cartridge in a compact handgun as a concept really didn't exist. So back in those days, the defensive shooter, if he or she desired a compact handgun chambered for a full service power cartridge, usually had to resort to a small frame revolver like my Model 637 here. That meant they also had to live with the either 5 or 6 shot ammunition capacity of those small frame revolvers. And as I said, if they wanted a semi-auto with a higher ammunition capacity, they generally had to go to something chambered for a smaller and less powerful cartridge. Then back during the late 70s and early 80s, a couple of custom gun manufacturers started to do something that was fairly radical at the time. They took Smith & Wesson pistols, specifically the Model 39s and the Model 59s, and they reduced the length of the barrel and slide and also cut down the length of the butt. One of those companies was called DeVell, and they had what they called their Full House Model 59, which, as I just said, was a shortened version of the Model 59. It had a reduced butt length, and it had a 10-shot magazine capacity that was still all 9mm service pistol cartridges. So what we saw really for the first time, especially with an American firearm, was a full power, or at least full service power, cartridge chambered in a very compact pistol. This was something that caught the attention of Smith & Wesson, and circa 1984 they started to release what they originally called their miniguns. The miniguns eventually became known as the Model 469, which usually had the blued steel slide and blackened anodized frame, or the Model 669, which was a stainless steel slide over a silver anodized frame. Now, if there was a downside to the custom firearms like the DeVell and also the Asp, which was manufactured simultaneously, it is that they were expensive. When Smith & Wesson introduced the miniguns, for the first time, defensive shooters had a very compact semi-automatic pistol that was still chambered for the full power 9mm cartridge, and it came in at a production pistol price. So these pistols were very popular right out of the gates. The miniguns found favor with detectives and other plainclothes police officers, and also for the first time, as the, at that time, burgeoning concealed carry market was starting to grow, also concealed carriers had a compact option to use that was still chambered, as I said, for that full power 9mm cartridge. Eventually, the miniguns made the transition to the third generation pistols, and in the stainless steel version, it became known as the 6906, and in the blued steel version, it became known as the 6904. So far as I know, there were never any third generation pistols that were manufactured in the brushed nickel finish like my 469 here. In fact, this was probably among the last, if not the last, pistols that Smith & Wesson regularly offered, I should say, in a nickel finish. Before I start my up-close review of this Model 469, I want to make a quick comment about the name minigun or miniguns. I'm not sure that that terminology was ever used by many folks outside of the Smith & Wesson factory. But when I went to my first armorer's course in the early 1990s, the Smith & Wesson instructors there were using that term collectively for the 469 and the 669, and also the third generation pistols were out at that time, so also the Model 6904 and 6906. So as a convenience throughout this review, I'll use the term minigun or miniguns to refer to these pistols as a group, rather than constantly trying to go back and forth and recite all of the model numbers and keep them straight and not misspeak while I'm going through the review. In essence, the miniguns were really nothing but a shortened version of the 59 series pistols, and I'll use my 5904 here to demonstrate this. Although this is a third generation pistol, it still retains the same basic dimensions as the original Model 59. And when I place the 469 on top of it and try to line everything up so you can see it, and I might have to turn the pistols a little bit here, but you can see that roughly a ½ an inch has been removed from the end of the slide in the barrel. And try to line it up again, maybe 3/8 of an inch or just slightly less than ½ an inch has been removed from the butt. This also resulted in a weight reduction. The 59 series pistols weighed about 28.5 ounces, and the miniguns weigh about 26 ounces, so about 2.5 ounces shaved off the weight of this pistol, as well as the dimensions that were reduced in the terms of the barrel and slide and the buttstock. Okay, starting at the top of the 469 and working our way down, we'll first take a look at the sights. And you can see in the second generation pistols, Smith & Wesson had not yet adopted the use of the 3-dot system. So the rear sight is drift adjustable for windage, but rather than 2 white dots, it has the white outline around the rear sight, similar to Smith & Wesson revolver sights. The front sight is also considerably different, and I will see if I can focus in on this so that you can see some of these features. The face of the front sight is serrated to reduce glare, and there's also a vertical yellow line in the front sight, apparently intended to increase the visibility of the front sight. And I'll see if I can line them up for you to be able to see, and I might need to change the focus again. But that is the sight picture. And also the front sight is integral to the barrel, unlike the third generation pistols that came about a few years later, which had the front sight dovetailed into the slide. This is actually part of the slide that is machined when the pistol is manufactured. So the only way to change this front sight is to mill it off and then fashion a new front sight and either pin it in or put a dovetail into the slide in order to be able to install that new front sight. So changing the front sight on the earlier Smith & Wesson pistols is not nearly as easy as the later pistols and pistols from other manufacturers. The miniguns have a 3.5-inch barrel. Also, they use Smith & Wesson's external extractor, and as you can see, there is a non-ambidextrous safety decocker, and I'll cut the action here. The later second generation pistols did add the ambidextrous decocking lever that was attached with a screw, and by the time the third generation pistols came around, that ambidextrous lever was attached with a pin and spring. But this is one of the earlier ones. If I didn't mention it before, this pistol was manufactured in 1984. It was among the very first miniguns that would have been produced by Smith & Wesson, and also it was produced in this limited edition brushed nickel finish. The second generation miniguns, as well as the other second generation Smith & Wesson pistols, utilized the traditional Walther-style double-action operating system, meaning the first shot is fired with a double-action pull of the trigger, where the trigger both cocks and then releases the hammer. After the first shot is fired, the hammer stays in the cocked position, and each successive shot is fired with a single-action pull of the trigger, where a short, light trigger pull simply releases the cocked hammer, unless or until the shooter decides to decock the pistol. The pistol is decocked by rotating the safety decocker to the downward position. That safely lowers the hammer. The pistol will not fire when the safety is used in that manner. And that also disengages the trigger function of the pistol, so the pistol cannot be fired with the safety decocker in the downward position. The lever has to be rotated back to the upward position in order for the pistol to be able to be fired again. Another interesting design feature of the miniguns that differentiates them from the other Smith & Wesson pistols of the day is the fact that they used a spurless hammer. So there's no way to physically cock this pistol, and I believe that was taken right from the DeVal pistols, and it was intended to make them more snag resistant, so as the pistol was being drawn, there was not a hammer spur there to catch on any type of clothing. And unlike my 5904 here, which has a hammer spur and can be physically cocked if you want to put it into single action mode, there's no way to really do that with these pistols. That's not really a downside. These pistols I don't think were ever intended to be physically cocked and used in that manner. And again, it's just something to really make them a little bit more appealing and a little bit more practical for the concealed carrier or the plainclothes police officer back in the mid-1980s. The second generation Smith & Wesson pistols and even the early third generation pistols made use of this finger rest machined into the front of the trigger guard. As you can see, it is also checkered, and it's intended to be used with that finger forward grip that was popular back during the 1980s. Some people still use that grip, but it's largely faded away. There are still a few manufacturers that maintain some type of checkering on the front of the trigger guard just for that finger placement, but again, it's largely faded away. One of the nice things about the miniguns is they retained largely the grip profile and curvature of the larger pistols, so they fit the shooter's hand very well. This one, as you can see, has Pachmayr grips that have been installed. I may well try to find some of the original grips to put back on these because they're a little thinner than the Pachmayrs. The Pachmayrs increased the grip circumference slightly, and I think I would prefer this to be a little bit more slim. Even so, the Pachmayrs have a good tactile feel, and I do like that. As I mentioned earlier, the miniguns have a 12-round magazine capacity, and this is something to be aware of if you're looking at one of these pistols in the used gun case. These magazines are not real easy to come by. They are out there, but they're not as plentiful as some others. The good news is the 59 series magazines will fit and function just fine in the miniguns, but they do extend slightly from the butt. The other good news is these magazines are still being manufactured, not by Smith & Wesson, but by Mech-Gar. So you can still get 59 series magazines, and there are a lot of 59 series Smith & Wesson magazines out there that you can also find. But if you want the original 12-shot minigun magazines, they're not as easy to locate as the bigger 59 series magazines. Another interesting thing about the miniguns from a design standpoint is in these pistols we start to see some of the features that later became standard in the third generation, beginning with the stamped metal side plate that we see right here along the top of the grip. This also serves as a point for the plunger and the slide stop to bear against. And when the slide is retracted because of that spring pressure and the angle of the side plate, that forces the slide stop down. That's why you're able to chamber around simply by grabbing the slide, pulling it back, and then releasing it, because the slide stop automatically pushes itself down out of engagement with the slide. Also, we see Smith & Wesson do away with the removable barrel bushing in the front of the slide and go to the type of barrel configuration that also later became standard with the third generations. These pistols, like all Smith & Wesson pistols, have a full-length guide rod for the recoil spring, and the disassembly follows the same pattern as virtually all Smith & Wesson pistols. Retract the slide to the point where this cut lines up with this portion of the slide stop, and now I'm going to push on the slide stop pin on the other side and push that right out of the frame. Now I'm going to allow the slide to come forward off the rails, and as you saw, the hammer will fall as you do that. That's normal. I can now remove the recoil spring and guide rod and the barrel, and I can now clean my pistol or maintain it as necessary. Reassembly is in reverse order. You need to make sure that the flange on the guide rod rests in this little cutout right here. And see if I can get it in there. This is always easier to do when I'm not trying to reach around a camera. And as you can see, it's easier to line things up when I don't have to do that. Now, as you bring the slide back onto the frame, it's going to stop when it comes up against the ejector, and we're just going to push that down. That's going to allow it to come back a little bit farther. And now I have two more levers that I'm going to have to push down out of the way. Again, I'm going to retract it, and I'm going to replace my slide stop, just like that. And our pistol is now reassembled and ready for use. The miniguns, as well as I believe all Smith & Wesson first and second generation pistols, has a magazine disconnect safety, meaning when the magazine is removed from the pistol, the trigger mechanism is disabled and the pistol won't fire. When it's reinserted, as it is there, the pistol will function normally. But that is something to be aware of. I don't believe pistols of this kind without the magazine disconnect came around until the third generation was manufactured. The trigger pull on these older Smith & Wesson pistols was usually pretty good, and this pistol is no exception. The double action pull is long and somewhat heavy, of course, but it's smooth. There is, at the very beginning, you can probably hear it there, a little bit of a click, and I believe all that's happening is the sear is clicking past that first notch in the hammer. But once the trigger passes that point, the remainder of the double action pull is very good. The single action pull is extremely good on this pistol. It is light, it has a very nice let off. And I'm going to try to measure those two trigger pulls with my trigger pull gauge. I don't know if I'll be able to measure that double action pull. It might exceed the 12-pound limit of my gauge. Maybe not. Maybe I can still get that one. But the single action pull should definitely be measurable. And let's see where those two trigger pulls come in. And that double action pull is right at the limit of my trigger pull gauge. I was trying it a couple of times off camera, and the first time I was not able to get it. It did exceed the 12-pound pull. The second time I did get a reading at 12 pounds, 1.3 ounces. I'll try it on camera one time to see if I can get another reading that you can see. And I don't know if I'll be able to do this or not, but I'll give it a try. See if I can get the glare off so you can see it there. and it registered as over, but still shows a trigger pull weight of 12 pounds 1.7 ounces. So it looks like we're just over 12 pounds for the double action pull. And now I'll give the single action trigger a try, and this should be much easier to get a reading for. And it's a little heavier than I thought, 6 pounds 6.3 ounces. Let's try that again. It does not feel that heavy, and part of that could just be that the trigger pull is so short that it feels lighter than it is. And 6 pounds 1.9 ounces, so just over 6 pounds, but I have to say again, the trigger does not feel that heavy in single action mode. And the other thing to be aware of with these Smith & Wesson pistols of the first through the third generation style is the fact that the reset, for those of you that are concerned about reset when the pistol fires, the reset on these triggers is very short, right there. That's what, maybe a 1/16 of an inch that I release the trigger until it resets and can be fired again. So very, very impressive reset. And that's something I remember about these pistols all the way back to when I first started using one in the police academy. Interestingly, mentioning the police academy, my roommate, while I was attending the police academy, was issued by his department, which I believe was the Elyria, Ohio Police Department, a .469, and that was their standard issue pistol for patrol officers, plainclothes officers, and everyone else. And his, of course, was blued. It wasn't nickel, but still, that just shows the versatility and the popularity of this type of Smith & Wesson pistol back when they were still being manufactured. And before I finish the shop review, I wanted to give you all a close-up look at this brushed nickel finish. Again, there were not very many of these made. I believe they were all made for the Ashland Shooting Supply. And I actually grew up in Ashland, Ohio. I can remember going to the Ashland Shooting Supply when I was a kid with my father. And it was around for many years. I don't believe it's with us any longer. It moved out of Ashland some years ago, and I don't think it's in business at all anymore. But they did have certain custom firearms that they ordered from Smith & Wesson, and this is one of them. And as I said, this would be among the last standard production pistols that Smith & Wesson ever offered with a nickel finish. And that's going to do it for the shop review of my .469 minigun. In part 2 of this video, we'll head out to the range and we'll see how it performs. If you have any questions or comments on this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you order anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. Until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.